Hi, hi, Robert. Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see
uh,
you.
do we have some news today that we want to talk about? I guess just for the benefit of anyone watching this, I'm Stanley Leo. I'm an associate lawyer at Lowe and Company, and and Robert, maybe you can give a brief introduction for yourself.
Sure. Stan and I are colleagues at Lowe and Company. Um, I'm sitting in my office in Vancouver, and Stan is sitting in his office in Winnipeg.
That's right. Yeah, and it's the weather differences are pretty obvious. I'm right at my window, so I'm sure it looks sunny where you are, but it's already an evening for me.
Yeah, it's a typical Vancouver day. It started off very cloudy, but it's gloriously sunny now. Yeah. So, anyways, so we were talking about some news in the immigration field today.
That's right. Yeah. So there was the announcement of the upcoming levels plans
Hmm.
for the Canadian government, immigration levels plans for the next 3 years, and it's making some headlines because overall it looks like it's a significant change from before.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the last half a day, that's probably been a huge sort of Twitter feed that's going on. A lot of talk and discussion about the levels plan that the federal government has put out.
Hmm.
But I think what's also interesting is that in that annual report tabled by the immigration minister,
Hmm.
he's also put out the 2019 report, and we
Hmm.
can draw some sort of some pointers from there as well.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So, one of the things that I noticed was just obviously the levels, the new levels plan
Hmm.
for 2021, 2022, and 2023 is the numbers overall look much larger, but the range is what is probably one of the things that stands out. Like the low end of the targets is actually lower than before. Uh, it's the high end that is making probably the big headlines.
Mm. And I think that that kind of dovetails into what we were talking about earlier, which is that what's significant about this um, report by the immigration minister is that we have that full year report from 2019, so we know exactly what happened there.
Hmm.
We have these plans for the next 3 years, which are projections.
Hmm.
But I think what's significantly missing is information about what's happened this year in 2020.
Hmm.
We all know that this year has been very challenging, not just for immigration, but also for the economy, which has a direct effect on immigration.
For sure.
Hmm.
So for those who might be looking at the levels plan and just kind of wondering how it might affect them, um, what kinds? I think we're talking a little bit about this, but like, what kind of consequences do you think they might see practically in their experience with Canadian immigration?
Um, well, let's sort of pull things back and sort of remember what happened in the past. So
Hmm.
previously, when the federal government was under the Conservatives, I think their annual target was about 250,000 per year.
Hmm.
And then when the federal government came into power, and they started having this sort of 3 year plan, which was fantastic, I thought. And then they started ramping up numbers. Uh,
Hmm.
First, it was like 300,000 a year, then became 350,000 a year. And the messaging out there in terms of the news reports, people in the immigration industry was, hey, Canada's accepting 1 million immigrants over 3 years.
Hmm.
And that was the messaging.
Right.
And I think what one doesn't realize is that what's happened in the last half a year since March is that things have slowed down significantly
Hmm.
in terms of uh, applications being processed
Mhm.
to completion. And so I think we have to sort of take that into consideration when we're looking at these numbers
Mhm.
in the coming years.
Certainly, processing capacity has been impacted significantly, and even people who have been having their applications approved, if
Yeah.
they're outside Canada, they sometimes have a very challenging they have very challenging means of trying to find their way to Canada to land, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Because I think the big thing that a lot of people are not addressing is that
Mhm.
there is a finite number of immigration officers processing these applications.
Mhm.
Now, unless we see in the budget that suddenly there's an increase in funding to increase the number of officers who are processing, or unless there's sort of a big switch into having machines do a lot of the processing. Otherwise,
Mhm.
you're always going to be limited by that factor.
Mhm.
And I think we've seen that in the last half a year, there were a lot of federal offices that were closed down or shut
Mhm.
down temporarily.
Mhm.
A lot of employees were unable to work, and therefore, with that intake still carrying on, we've kind of built up this inventory
Mhm.
that's sort of there, and that explains the delay in some of the processing.
Yes. Yeah.
And that inventory is going to spill into 2021,
Yep.
and that is going to be the majority of where this sort of increased intake is going to come from. I mean, that's in my opinion.
Mm.
Hmm.
So something that I noticed in the 2020 plan compared to the previous year is that so there, I mean, there is a little bit of good news for family class applicants, I believe, because the targets have increased, right? And I think that's in line with the recent, relatively recent announcements of the parent-grandparent sponsorship program.
Right.
It's in keeping with what the government is expecting to do. Um, so, one of the things that I guess I'm taking away from this today's announcement is that, especially in line with what they haven't, what's the government announced before about grandparents, is that this might be and after many years of there not really being that much um, pathway for people to make use of the parent-grandparent sponsorship program, it
Hmm.
might actually be a more accessible program in the next year or so.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that I think the government has faced a lot of pressure, and I think everyone was expecting the program to reopen earlier this year, and then with COVID, it just got pushed back later and later and later till
Yeah.
we only saw that expression of interest maybe a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
But when you look at the numbers and the levels planned for the next 3 years, it's actually constant. It's at
Yeah.
23,500 per year.
Hmm.
And I mean, I still have parent sponsorship files from a year, 2 years ago,
Yeah.
which are still in process.
Right.
So again, we have to take into account that there are applications in the system
Right.
that
Which will count towards these numbers.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So certainly overall, the numbers are encouraging, I guess, for those who are aiming for higher targets, but um, a lot of it is based on the present realities.
Hmm.
And so in terms of actual amounts of new immigrants admitted, it might not um, make a huge difference. Because one of the things that I was thinking of in terms of the economic immigration
Hmm.
targets was, one of the things we've seen in the last couple years has been that the size of each round of express entry invitations was not quite as large as it was maybe 3 years ago, when scores were maybe a bit lower than where they are now.
Hmm.
So with an increase in the target for federal economic immigrants, to me, one of the things I was thinking about was, well, maybe maybe that might result in some larger invitations, rounds of invitations, and that would have an add-on effect for what the minimum score required might be. But if they do have a huge inventory of applications that they need to process now, that may not actually be what we see play out. So certainly it's still incumbent on prospective applicants to do whatever they can to get as many points as they can, because in relief in terms of a minimum score, the minimum score required for an invitation may not actually be forthcoming.
Yeah, I mean, I think what was very telling this year was when they started sort of separating and having program-specific draws for the Canadian Experience class.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the interesting things about that was that the cutoff for the Canadian Experience class was actually lower
Right.
than a no program specified draw, which I would, postulate consists mainly of federal skilled workers.
Right.
So that means there are a sizable number of federal skilled worker applicants with points which are higher than those who are already in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, I think that the system has matured in a way that, people kind of know where the sweet spot is already.
Right.
And that has helped a lot of applicants who are outside Canada, who find that they can meet that sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
And if one were to look at the pool of candidates, so every time there's a draw, there's actually a snapshot of the number of applicants in the pool.
Right.
I think that gives us an indication that there are actually a sizable number of very qualified candidates in the pool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for sure. And many of whom who are just below even the cutoff, who may find their points increasing if they can boost their score a little bit. So certainly a very, very competitive band of scores.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's anything else you might want to add about
Yeah,
the
I
levels plan.
thought that it might be a good idea. I think, like I said earlier on, to sort of have a look at the annual report and draw some pointers from there. And I think one point stood out very significantly to me, which I thought maybe we can spend some time to look at that.
Okay.
So here I am sharing my screen with you and looking at the annual report and the 2019 situation. Now, the interesting thing about this is that, they've indicated here that they've issued about 400,000 temporary work permits.
Mm-hmm.
But the number of individuals who transition from temporary to permanent resident is actually a very small percentage of that.
Yep.
Only 74,500. So, again, there's been a lot of messaging to people that, you can first come as a student, you can find a job, and then with a job, you can immigrate. In between, I think sometimes one needs to take stock that it's not that straightforward, and one has to really examine the applicant's situation to find whether or not there's actually a clear path. And I think, Stan, you and I, we both practice with that objective in mind, which is, we always sort of discuss with the clients what are their eventual objectives. And if their eventual objectives is permanent resident, then, we kind of take that and plan for them a pathway instead of doing it sort of in segments,
Right.
because you run the risk that, if you bring the whole family here and then find that you might not have a good case for immigration, that really affects a lot of people.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And the rules do change over time too. So that's always something that we have to be aware of with and advising our clients on. And we do try to stress that. But coming in with a plan to achieve all the goals, and that's a cohesive plan um, from the outset is critical. And something I noticed that isn't usually talked about in terms of the immigration levels plan numbers too is um, the levels plan numbers they don't just refer to, like, each number does not refer to a single applicant. It refers to applicant and accompanying dependents, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're talking about 401,000 immigrants being admitted, that might only, if you assume that it's for each person is roughly a family of 3
Mm-hmm.
or even 2, let's just say 2. So everyone is married, for example, or has a common law partner, then you're having the number of applications that they're actually accepting right away. So in terms, when you look at the number here, in terms of on the screen, about 75,000 individuals transition from temporary resident to permanent resident.
Mm-hmm.
That's 75,000 out of like the 341,000. So in terms of number of applicants that were involved, it was probably even a much smaller number than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So it just, again, stands it to your point that people who are coming here as temporary residents, if they don't have a clear plan and clear understanding of how they fare in the immigration system, there might be some unhappy information that they have to deal with afterwards when they're actually trying to finally go through that final step of their goal.
Yeah. Now, another point that I wanted to sort of look into is in the tables, actually. So if we were to look in detail at the tables
Mm-hmm.
In this annual report, I think first of all, we have this table about source countries, and
Mm-hmm.
it's no surprise that India is leading the way.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they make up a quarter of all immigrants, 25%, which
Mm-hmm.
is very huge, and they outstrip China by more than half, by
Right.
more than double. Sorry,
Double.
more
Yeah.
than double. But this table number 3, is really the one that I wanted to sort of highlight.
Mm.
And what it shows is permanent residents admitted in 2019 by destination and immigration category. Now, we know that the largest sort of economic category is the federal high skilled.
Yep.
But the second is actually the provincial nominee program.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing for me here is that when we look at the numbers here, now BC has the largest number,
Mm-hmm.
even more than Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is not surprising to me because, I feel that, BC has, has a very, very robust PNP program, and
Right.
one that's been in existence for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
What surprised me was that the second highest number of PNPs were actually under the Manitoba PNP program.
Mm-hmm.
And you being in Winnipeg now, that might be an interesting number for you to look at.
Certainly something to consider.
Mm-hmm.
That's that's a helpful chart to also kind of see um, where, what programs seem to be the most popular as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Good. So, okay, I think that those are kind of like the sort of a snapshot of what we can see. Obviously, there's a lot more if we dive a lot deeper, but I think maybe for the purposes of this this video, that just gives a taste of some of the information out there.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds good. Thanks for your insights into the levels plan. It's helpful, and I'm sure it'll be helpful for others. and hope I was able to offer some insight as well.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
Okay, we'll chat again. And
Mhm.
but thanks to everyone listening and watching, and hope to have something up again soon.
All right. Keep safe. Take
You
care.
too.